Jessie and David were in a loving and committed relationship when they decided to start a family. When their daughter was born, suddenly, their dog Benji wouldn't leave the baby's side. They tried to separate the dog from the baby, but then she wouldn't stop barking. After looking into the matter, David was stunned to figure out what was really going on. When the cops pulled up to the house, David was stunned. How had his dog realized what was going on until now? How had he, the baby's father, not been able to see what the truth is? After the police showed up on the scene, they all immediately began to ask questions. They questioned both Jessie and David, who were both still in a state of shock. They couldn't believe just how serious the situation was, but it was finally starting to sink in. The reason the police came for was certainly disturbing, but what bothered the parents even more was the fact that it was going on for so long, ever since Jessie was pregnant. They realized too late that they had put their trust in the wrong people. So why did Benji insist on staying with the baby? It all began when Jessie and David found out that she had finally gotten pregnant. They had been wanting to become parents for a long time, so this was fantastic news. The one thing that was nagging them was what to do about their dog, Benji. They hoped that she would respond well to the baby when she arrived. Jessie had already heard scary stories about dogs that just wouldn't accept a new baby in the house, and she really hoped that wouldn't be the case with Benji. Otherwise, they would have to make the heartbreaking decision to give her away. One day, Jessie noticed that Benji was barking at her belly. Perhaps she finally realized that Jessie was pregnant? This scared Jessie even more. She decided to take Benji to the veterinarian in order to rule out that anything was wrong with Benji herself. Of course, if they had to choose between their baby and their dog, of course they would take Benji to a shelter. He did routine checks to make sure that Benji was all right, and everything came back looking fine. What the vet did say was that Benji might be feeling that there's something up with the baby. He advised that Jessie go to the hospital for a checkup just in case. When Jessie called the doctor, he told her to come in immediately. She decided to call her friend Anne, who was always there for her, in order to take her to the doctor. Anne showed up immediately and took her to the hospital. The doctor started out with ultrasound and other tests to make sure that everything was okay with the pregnancy. All of the test results came out totally fine for both baby and Jessie, who was still left with many unanswered questions. After getting him, Jessie completely broke down, as she didn't want to have to choose between her baby and Benji. Jessie was comforted to know that she had such a good friend to rely on who could also keep an eye on Benji. A few weeks later, Jessie gave birth to a healthy baby girl, who she and David named Lily. Benji was still acting strangely, but things were about to get a whole lot more erratic. In the first few weeks of Lily's life, Jessie and David were able to be at home in order to take care of her completely. Eventually, Benji seemed to calm down. Eventually, the parents had to go back to work. When they did go back to working, Anne called them with some troubling news. Anne let them know that while she was watching them, Benji was refusing to let Lily sleep alone. Jessie was quite confused and taken aback, but when she told David, he didn't think it was noteworthy. David decided to take her to the vet again, who did not give him reassuring news. He said that they either had to take Benji to a shelter or figure out what was causing her to act this way immediately. The vet also made an implication that really bothered David. He said that they might be the problem. Otherwise, why was Benji so concerned about letting Lily sleep alone? David was pretty confident that they were not the problem, but doubts started to creep in and added to his anxiety. The fact was that each time David took Lily to her bed or she fell asleep, Benji immediately showed up at her side. David didn't think it was too crazy but was still confused. However, one day, Anne called and everything changed. She told David that Benji had bitten her, which made him realize something. David suddenly connected the dots. Benji would only act strangely when Anne was around. Benji was actually calm when Anne wasn't around, so it could only be that Anne was causing the problems. When David shared his concerns with Jessie, she told him to calm down and that he was overreacting. She pointed out the fact that Benji didn't let Lily sleep alone at night, so it couldn't be that Anne was the problem. What was the truth? Jessie thought it could be useful to install cameras all around the house in order to keep an eye on what was happening. They could see what Lily, Benji, and Anne were all up to. When they told her about the cameras, Anne seemed uneasy, which David immediately thought was suspect. He didn't trust her at all. After scanning through the first few days of footage, David didn't find anything unusual. Benji was still being very protective and was looking out for Anne. It seemed like Benji didn't trust Anne at all, and this made David want to confront her even more. One day he broke, and he started yelling at Anne, "What are you doing to my daughter?" She was completely caught off guard. However, she didn't take this lightly. She answered furiously that the dog was acting up ever since Jessie was pregnant before she was around. Then Jessie came home. Jessie was so angry at David for confronting Anne, as she could not believe that her partner was confronting her best friend about harming Lily. In that moment, David suddenly realized that Anne gave him all the information he needed to know. He thought about how Benji acts up at night, and he had never reviewed the nighttime footage. He knew what he had to do. When he went to check, he saw that all of the nighttime footage had been deleted. He decided to make an encrypted backup of the night recordings each day. He knew that this would lead him to the answers. The next day, when he checked the footage, he finally saw something disturbing climbing through the window of the baby's room. David was completely stunned, and he could barely breathe. He kept watching, and he couldn't believe what he was seeing. He knew that he had to call the cops immediately before things got even more out of hand. David called Jessie and told her to come home immediately. He heard the sirens outside the house, and the first cops showed up. Jessie arrived at home and demanded to hear what was going on. When David showed her the footage, she fell to her knees. One of the officers told David and Jessie that they should be proud of their dog for having the sense that something was wrong. He looked through the footage, and they told him about Benji's behavior towards Anne. The officer was absolutely stunned. The police officers immediately asked about Anne's whereabouts. They needed to question her personally. They gave the cops her phone number, but she didn't answer. Where did she go? Jessie told them everything she knew. In the meantime, Benji was in Lily's room when the police went in. She immediately ran over to the wall and started barking at it. It seemed as though she was telling them that there was something there in the wall. Using a sledgehammer, they broke through the wall. There they found a hidden compartment. What was it? They started taking everything out of the hidden compartment, where they found a safe. They needed to find a safe cracker. While this was going on, other police officers ran a background check on Ann Anderson. What they found stunned everyone. The truth was that there was no Anne. The woman who Jessie thought was her friend had completely lied and made up a whole life. Jessie broke down, not knowing how to digest the information that the best friend she knew for 10 years was a fraud. What was going on, and what was in that safe? They finally got a hold of the safe cracker. All the while, Benji was barking at the safe. She also was still not leaving Lily's side. When the safe was finally opened, everyone was completely surprised to see what was inside. Inside of the safe, they found money, jewelry, documents, and also passports. While one of the police officers opened up one of the passports, Jessie gasped, "That's Annie!" She yelled out. They realized that Anne's true identity was that of an international spy who was wanted in 17 countries for espionage. Jessie was absolutely stunned. She entered Jessie and David's lives because David worked as director of a national security company, and he had access to a national security grid. Anne was probably hired by a rival company to leak secrets. At night, she would try to hack his computer and then would wipe the footage. Thanks to Benji, the spy was finally caught.